Hello everyone, welcome.
Thank you.
To RDW Talks. This is a new format we are trying to explore to find new perspective for what Romanian Design Week mean. Sometimes we get guests from abroad and we maybe miss the opportunity to discover a little bit more about their perspective, the way they see what is happening in Romania, how they perceive Romanian creativity. We need this perspective so we can understand a little bit more our place in the world and maybe discover opportunities to grow. So hello, Anoushka Cole.
Hi.
I'm very excited about this talk because I'm very enthusiastic about what way can we do with the resources we have. And I'm going to start by asking you to give us a little bit of background about what you did before arriving in that beautiful place in Câmpul Mușcel.
So my background from...
Yes, as a designer.
So I work as a material researcher and also a printmaker. I have a background in textile design and I did a master's in material futures, which kind of helped me to understand that I wanted to look at textiles and materials in a completely different mindset to maybe sort of traditional textile design within the UK industry. So I set up a material lab in a makerspace called Green Lab in London, and we sort of were working with material research and trying to understand material resources, what materials are, where they come from, what they can be, sort of disrupt the notion of a traditional material, start looking at waste, and kind of bring in sort of sustainable mindset within that. So we were a community makerspace where practitioners and students could come and work in that way. Because at the time, universities in London weren't really offering the right kind of studio environment for starting to work with materials in this slightly more unusual way. Whereas now, that sector within universities is starting to grow. So I now work at Chelsea College of Art, and I'm starting to build a material lab there for our textile students to engage with material research. And yes, I work sort of with work on community projects, run workshops for students, but also members of the community, and have a printmaking practice as well.
And what was your motivation to go toward this kind of, let's say, research material? Because usually, as we were talking before our interview, are going toward making products, making finished products, working with the industry. Do you feel that the designer field should evolve in this direction, or it was just your personal path?
I think it's really important to have both sort of areas of the industry and for them to collaborate heavily together. As I said, I did textile design. It's quite a traditional course. You're sort of trained to become a printmaker, a print designer, or an embroiderer, or a weaver. And I just wasn't satisfied with what I'd learned. I know I'd learned really intense sort of hand-making skills, and that's something I really value. But my brain I wasn't convinced with what I was doing, and I wanted to just explore the world around me through making. I think that's probably the best way to describe how I see what I do. And I was also, this was 10, 15 years ago. So I was really starting to get more interested in sustainability, and the notion of being a designer and sustainable is they're two really hard concepts to come together. The minute you make something, you're essentially creating waste, or everything has an environmental implication. So the first way I got into it was by working with waste and starting to think, okay, how can I minimize everything I'm doing? If it's working with waste that people don't want anymore, that's kind of an easy route into this kind of way of working. And organic waste really struck me as an area of interest. rather than, I guess, sort of plastic waste and things like that. And but I think it's really important that we still have our sort of tangible making skills, and obviously products are vital. We use them every single day, but I think it's just really questioning what our products are and where they come from, the route that they've sort of gone through to get to us. I think it's a collaboration of these making skills, but also sort of mindsets that are critically analysing what we're producing as nations. And
I had in mind the same word, mindset, because we were also talking beforehand about the educational system. And the challenge is to approach forming the mind of a designer with a different perspective, because when you work as a designer, you create products, but you also create waste. That's embedded in this field. So if you start from waste, going toward the end product would be a more sustainable way of learning the craft, and then creating a better world.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a bottom-up design approach rather than a top-down, which I think a lot more people are engaging with now. And obviously, if everyone, hopefully that's where we sort of get into a circular economy and waste doesn't exist and everything is sort of utilised and reworked into the system. But yeah, this notion of training designers to go and buy raw materials that have come from anywhere in the world to just make a sample with that might not even be a sort of, it blows my mind that we're still sort of educating in that way. Like for me, the role of a designer is to disrupt. And I think education systems need to make sure that that's embedded into their sort of curriculum.
Do you feel that circular design is still a buzzword, or things are starting to change?
Still a massive buzzword. It's hard. All of this stuff, it takes so much time, and sort of research and development of products and materials. I guess it's an idealism that maybe we'll achieve. I don't necessarily think that there's the right amount of funding for us to be achieving it at the rate that we need to. That's my opinion from the UK anyway, and I guess maybe similar here. I'm not sure how you feel, but
it's even worse. Let's say there are some private initiatives which are more than welcomed, but we really need to use this context more often to talk about our garbage. Usually in societies, also in Romania, garbage is a political field, and it should be a community and social field. And we need also to educate our kids about the waste they make. When they are bored, they are starting to make waste. And this is something that we really need to be aware if we want to have a better world and live in a healthy world. But coming back to initiatives, I'm more than happy that British Council has a proper program for the notion of circular economy. And usually British Council has the background and the tools to create a pragmatic and let's say functional program. And I would like to approach now this subject. How did you started working with British Council? And then we'll go further in what happened here in Romania.
Sure, yeah. So there was an open call back in, I think it was end of 2019, beginning of 2020, for a residency program for some designers to be hosted from the UK in Romania. We were going to come to Romanian Design Week. So I sort of applied for the program. It was already sort of talking about the role of heritage crafts and craftsmanship in Romania and rural identities and communities, which is something that I'm really interested in, this kind of divide between urban and rural environments. I think especially being a student in London, sometimes you're very aware that you're maybe talking about communities that you're not necessarily actually having a
Engaging
dialogue
with.
with. And that kind of struck me as an odd notion, and I kind of really wanted to explore rural areas. So yeah, I applied for the open call and got selected, and then unfortunately, obviously 2020 kind of didn't go the way that was planned for anyone. So the program kind of went to sleep for a few years, and then luckily it sort of came back alive. Christiana got us all back involved. So it came out a week ago to finally get started.
So just a little bit of background information about this program. It's called Circular Catalyst, and it's part of a large program of British Council, which is called Circular Cultures. It's being implemented in different countries around Europe. But this one, Circular Catalyst, was especially conceived for Romania together with Romanian Cultural Institute. And the idea is to pair British designers and researchers with local partners, designers but also entrepreneurs, to engage these rural communities. Romania still has a very vibrant rural area, and it's somehow different than rural areas in Western Europe. The vibe is completely different, and sometimes there are also a lot of challenges. They are still maintaining a very traditional way of, let's say, developing the community, social rules, but in the same time there are challenges, economical challenges, and also the problem of migration, especially of young people. They go abroad to work, and many times they just end up there, even though they still maintain houses in their villages. Sometimes their kids are still living with the grandparents. Mm-hmm. So there are many challenges around what we can keep from all these traditions, how can we maintain and how can we develop vibrant rural communities, because this is a strong point of Romania and also probably other Balkan countries, the fact that we still have this way of life, which from which we can learn a lot as modern people living mostly in very dense urban spaces. Tell me a little bit about what happened, especially for you, because you worked with Pro Patrimonio, and especially with these two talented girls, Andreea Machidone and Ruxanda Sakalish. They are developing a lot of projects around Pro Patrimonio in Câmpul Mușcel, which is a place, let's say a very nice place, a very nice villa with a surrounding area. You arrived there. What happened? How was the whole experience?
They devised a sort of a program for the week, which was amazing. So we started off by visiting a local crafts lady, Maria Plopino, I think her name was. And she has a living museum and is very much engaged in the sort of traditional rural textiles craft. So she was showing us her collection that she's sort of collected over some items are sort of over 100 years old. And then also she's been working with traditional textiles her whole life. So she was explaining sort of what that looks like. And sharing her story, which was really interesting as my sort of first experience of rural craft in Romania. And then we also went to visit a spinning mill in Câmpulung, which again, I think he said it's one of maybe 4 or 5 that are left in Romania. It's very similar to the wool industry in the UK at the moment in terms of it's just not sort of receiving the support that it needs. It costs more to shear a sheep than you can sell the fleece for. So, yeah, it's a bit of a dying industry, which is such a shame because it's such an incredible material and answers a lot of problems when it comes to petroleum-based materials. And then again, sort of met with some community members. They were showcasing their traditional family textiles, really sort of highlighting how important that is in the area. And then we also were exploring, so we were staying at the villa and we were exploring the grounds and sort of the objects that are, the historical objects that are still situated in the villa. And then also exploring Campalong generally. We went up into the hills and mountains with a local guide. And that's kind of when we started our project for the week that we'd sort of devised. I have a background in, as I said, material research, and also look at natural dyes. And Roxy and Andrea were both have sort of looked at this before as well. So we decided to collaborate on that, and we were foraging dye plants from the hills and the forests, really seeing it as sort of a chance to not having any sort of set plan, just seeing what we could gather, what had fallen from the trees, what was available at this time of year. I didn't know exactly what they'd be. So yeah, we just foraged a whole bunch of plant materials, took them back to the villa, and then spent 2 days creating dyes with some really successful results. We managed to make some beautiful colours and started to dye some materials and some wool from the spinning mill that we'd been to. And then this was all kind of working towards creating a set of objects that kind of could illustrate both our time there, but also the history of the villa. So there's a collection called the Cantali collection that Patrimonio have previously made. So we kind of, and it's sort of encompassed some traditional textiles and tablecloths and linens. So we sort of developed that further and created some natural dye products. And then we had a community day on Saturday where we invited all the community to sort of work on a shared long tablecloth, working with the wool that we dyed. Then they were also creating their own textile prints from leaves in the garden, and all stitching onto this beautiful sort of really long tablecloth that kind of showed the idea of collaborative making and sort of working hands-on in a tangible way, but sort of maybe thinking and questioning sort of what you were working with. So yeah, it was a very, very inspirational, good week. My brain is now full of ideas, and it was just really great to see, get more of a feel for sort of rural Romania, the crafts that you guys have here, and the differences, but then also the similarities that we all sort of share everywhere you go. You know, there's similar stories and narratives that can be sort of woven together, and yeah, just seeing, I think sort of understanding through making is a really nice way to explore an area.
Very interesting, and it seems it's been an exciting week and full of new impressions, and I'm pretty sure they will decant. And
Yeah.
something will come up in a creative way. I think it's very important from these talks to emphasize opportunities, as we were speaking beforehand also. What do you feel now after spending this time in Romania? I know it's not much, but in the same time you had the opportunity to also discuss with local designers. What do you think are the opportunities for young designers coming out of school benches right now in Romania?
I think the notion of multidisciplinary design is really important, and I think I've always thought, as much as we move forward and we sort of challenging and questioning and creating new concepts of what design can be, it's really vital to look back as well and look to your traditional craftsmen and women and understand where making has come from, and this melting pot for both. I think that's really a really interesting area, and to engage different generations within these subjects, creating that connection and making sure that you're not just creating new products for young people, but sort of bringing the loop together, and not forgetting that these rural crafts are really important, and these tangible skills shouldn't be lost. There's so much room for them when we start talking about sustainability and resource use sort of moving forward. If you start looking to people that have been working with limited resources in the first place, then there's some really interesting developments that can come from that. But again, having this sort of critical design head on when you're approaching making, and yeah.
What would be the challenges because this is a sensitive point, I'm pretty sure not only in Romania, but we struggle collaborating, especially when we talk about people from other social backgrounds or other professions. What do you feel are the challenges when engaging with communities, especially rural communities, and how can you approach this type of challenges?
I think it's just being very open and honest about what it is you're doing. I think you need to always be careful not to just be taking from a community, but also be giving back and engaging them in the whole process. If communities don't want to engage, then that is an issue, and it's difficult to get around it. But in my experience, there is always a community that will be happy to engage, even if it's not the first one that you approach. I had this I worked on a project where I was working with British fishermen who historically, I mean, the British fishing industry on the small scale is kind of a dying trade. So most of them were of the older generation, and I got a lot of no's before I got any yeses when I wanted to talk to them about their industry. And there is fear of the unknown and sort of newcomers coming to ask you too many questions, and so I think it's a delicate balance. And you do have to tread carefully, and not to be criticizing people. I think is sort of to be collaborating if they're open to it, but not being too critical of things that have come in the past and the ways that people are living their lives.
Interesting. Thank you very much. I would also ask you to have a commentary about maybe something that I didn't manage or didn't find time to ask you about your impressions about all this program. How do you feel about it? What are you looking for in the future regarding maybe relationship with Balkans or Romania in particular? It's
been really great to come and experience a country in this way. It's so different from coming on holiday, even if you're coming for a sort of cultural holiday. But being paired with local designers, it just means that I've got such a brilliant insight into the sort of industry here, and understand sort of the challenges, but also the positives. I think this knowledge exchange is absolutely vital. It's kind of, and sort of as we've been talking a little bit about Brexit and the UK sort of isolating itself, which is obviously, in my opinion and in a lot of young people's opinion, the worst thing that we could have done. And this just kind of highlights how important it is to have relationships and communities across borders, and being open and sharing knowledge and creating a sort of network of like-minded people, or people that are going to challenge the way that you look at the world, and challenge your concept of anything, but in my case in making and sort of being creative. I think it would be great to build on these relationships that we've sort of made this last week, and build on sort of sharing with each other, hopefully.
Hopefully, we'll see more and more new connections between UK and Europe. We need that.
Yeah.
Especially young generation. We need that.
Yes, we definitely need that.
We can repair and rebuild.
Exactly. As we were saying, sometimes when you're sort of in a difficult situation, it's when the most positive work comes out of it, and we can definitely repair relationships.
Let's end up the discussion on this positive note. Thank you, Anoushka, once again.
Thank you so much.
I'm looking forward to see results, to see collaborations through these amazing programs. Thank you also, British Council, for, let's say, creating this opportunity. Circular economy, hopefully, we'll
see.
start to work in a proper manner. Yeah. And yes. Thank you for being here in Romania.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks.